There, now I can see everybody. Woo. Is this thing turned down? Y'all hear me okay? Or do all of you hear me okay? I'm trying to get away from my southern. Y'all hear me okay? Okay. We have covered a lot of material, and we got a little bit more to go. So I hope you're not too wore out, like I am. I spent the morning with my brother that I've been trying to get him to move out of here, like I'm trying to get all you to move out of here. And we went on a 20-mile bike ride. And he and I are cyclists, and a buddy of his and I got together and went out and rode along the river. There's a beautiful trail out there. It's just gorgeous. But we had a nice time. We were talking about a lot of things, and it was along the thoughts that we've been, kind of working on. And my brother started asking me questions with his friend, and his friend is really new about a lot of things. And I just told him, I said, look, I said, I'm not a prophet nor a son of a prophet. I'm just me. But I know one thing. As we were reading in Matthew chapter 24, at the end of that discussion in chapter 24, Jesus says we can know that it's even at the door. We may not know the day and the hour or the exact time when all this is going to take place, but there's enough for us to be able to look at to recognize that things are not right. Things are just not right. And, I've had a lot of folks ask me over the years, why in the world did I do what I do and live the way I live and all that, and why did I leave a private practice and leave the big money world behind and raise my family on a farm and all that? Aren't you a little crazy? I had doctor friends of mine ask me, why don't you come back to practice? I says, why? I said, I don't want to raise my children in this environment, and I don't want to live that way anymore. I want to live where I can have some freedom. And so through all that journey, I guess I need to be real straight and honest with y'all. I thought I was seeking freedom, and I found myself becoming a slave to the land. But you know what? I wouldn't have it any other way. I love the life. It's a good life, and it's treated us well, and I'm very thankful for it. And so I've tried to condense a lifetime into a few short moments to help you all at least to see somewhat of a vision. We bought our piece of land years ago, and different ones have asked me, so, well, did you make your sole living off the farm? Well, we did, and we have for the last 40 years. But when it came down to making money, that came from real estate. All right? We would buy a piece of land, I'd build a homestead, we'd live there, I'd make a living off the farm and turn around and sell it and make money. And that money went into a retirement or into the next project so that we could improve our conditions better and better throughout our journey. And we've known a lot of people that go to the country and they buy a piece of land and they're there 40 years later. Well, I wished I could have done that, but we, did what we did in order to get ahead enough to where we could stay. And believe me, I am an avid believer in staying out of debt. When you're a borrower, you are a slave to the lender. I didn't want that. So it took us around 40 years to get where we are today so that we have total financial freedom. Now, you all don't have that time, I don't believe. And I just hope and pray that those that are here will pray seriously. Get together with friends and pray that the Lord will give you direction and helping you, because it's getting harder and harder. I grew up here in California. I left California about 45 years ago, and I've not looked back. This is the first time I've been in California in a long, long time. And I can't say I enjoy it. It has so populated this country, and it's just unbelievable, the things that are happening here. You know, as we've been talking about these subjects, and we've been talking about shelter, our next thought on the line is going to be dealing with your water source. The three main things that you've got to look for when you're looking to homestead. Now, believe me, when I talk homestead, something weird gets happening in my head. I don't know where you all are when it comes down to the idea of homesteading. Some of these folks that came from Europe understand the idea, the concept, probably than a lot of us good old Americans here. I was just very fortunate that I met people back in the 60s, that doesn't ring any bell to you all, that were homesteader-minded people. We called them back-to-lander people, and I was involved with that. Some of them called us hippies. Well, it was an interesting journey, to say the least. But I did, and I was blessed, and I didn't know how blessed I was, in spite of some of the things that we were doing and shouldn't have been doing. I learned a lot of beautiful arts about how to live with the land and on the land. It's a good life, friends. It is really a good life. I cannot tell you how much I'm thankful for the years that have passed, and my brother and I were talking about it, and I just sit there and I want to weep, because we're all getting older. And it's not as easy as it used to be. And I'm trying to figure out how in the world this time passed so fast. And here we are, at least I am. I'm a year away from 70 years old, and I'm still working like I'm in my 20s. But I wouldn't have it any other way. So when we talk about this subject, you've got to think of those three areas, and that is your shelter, that is your home base. We looked at that last night some, and I'm sure there's more questions on that subject of the homesteading home base, and I cannot emphasize it enough to y'all. You've got to think differently when you talk about your home base, what you're going to live in. Simplify your life, and it's going to make your life a lot better. Get away from the complication. As we were talking, what would happen if today, the power grid was shut off? How many in this room would survive it? See, most of us, there's only a few of us have any experience in living without the grid. And when we're talking about the grid, it's talking about, where does the water come that comes out of your spigots in your house? In fact, how does it even get there? From the creek. Yeah, you and I are related, I can tell. But to the majority of us, we have got to have our gates rattled to start thinking differently. I mentioned that last night to all of you. You know, people are just weirding out, and I can understand why they're weirding out. They sense something in their spirit. And they don't know what's happening, but there's something happening within their spirit that's telling them something's coming down the pike, and we're a little bit freaked out about what it is, but we don't know exactly what it is. Is that right? I have met a lot of folks, people, that have left the state of California. I told you this the first night, I think it was Friday night, There is a family that's leaving Sacramento, and they're back home right now. They bought 60 acres next to mine, right from here. I went to them and asked them, why in the world are you leaving California? He says, you don't want to know. He says, things are happening in California that's really frightening. And I'm going to tell you something. I called my wife last night and talked with her for a while. No, excuse me, it was this morning, because last night was 1 o'clock in the morning by the time I got in bed. And my wife would have definitely shot me for sure. But I called her this morning and talked with her, and she says, you know, Ron, I was watching something on the computer, and in the state of Washington and Oregon, and it's coming to California, that the state of Oregon and the state of Washington has now taken complete control of your water sources. They're shutting down homesteaders that have a flock of birds of 12 because they're saying their poop is contaminating our water. Well, they can pour the chemicals by the billions of pounds on the soil, destroying the land, and they're going after you homesteaders because you want your freedom. When we talk about homesteading, it's not just, oh, I'm going to move out of California, or I'm going to move up in the mountains of California. You better start thinking about the states that you can move to so you can homestead. And I know that's hard to hear for some of you because you're really set in here. You've been here for a lot of years, and you've got roots here, and you've got family here. But if you really want freedom, you're going to find a state that you can live. And that is the honest truth. I'm going to tell you something. My wife and I just about moved out of the United States to Central and South America. We were looking at land in Peru. And I about left here. And I might still. I do not like what's going on in this country right now. It's quite concerning. And I'll tell you the other thing that's more concerning of that, and I don't know where you all are at, so you'll just have to forgive me because I'm speaking right straight from my heart. This country, I told you I shouldn't talk about politics, but the Sabbath's gone, so I can talk politics now. So, we have seen, I believe you all are here for a reason. I don't believe this is just a happenstance that we're together. I believe providentially God is moving upon all of your hearts, whether you recognize it or not. All right? I knew He was working upon my heart when I was a hippie doing LSD and smoking pot. And when He started moving upon my heart and moving me away from that, I knew it was something more than human doings. So this whole thing about moving to the country, we need to start thinking more seriously, not just about getting in the country, but where in the world are you going to go to get in the country? Because I'm going to tell you something. The other thing that you have to deal with, you see that home up there. I told you all last night, I build my own homes. I build them according to the old farmstead styles of homes. I wished I would have brought the pictures of the inside of it. It's all post and beam, a lot of wood structure in there, wood cook stove. It's all set up with all the new components and super insulation, but it's set up enough to where if the grid falls apart, you have a home that's easy taken care of and easy to maintain. Do not build homes that are oversized for your family. Build or buy, and when you go to look at something, maybe you're going to look for a home that's already there. All right? But be careful of what you're doing when you look at homes that are already built. Make sure it suits what your needs are, not what your wants are. All right? The other thing you've got to look at when you're talking about homesteading, what are the laws that you have in your counties, in your states? How restricting are they to having that elbow space to do. Where I'm at here in Kentucky, the only building permit I had to get was for septic. Because I wanted I didn't want to, I was kidding my brother. I said, oh, Ken, I still have an outhouse, man. His friend just like a freak. I told him, I said, I'm kidding. I said, we have regular septic system. That's why I went and got the permit. But because we're off grid, and you know there are states in the union, my friends, that you cannot get off grid because they want your solar to be on grid, that they own your solar system, and they will cut you back what they want to cut you back on. I won't live in a state that's controlled by communistic mindset. I will not. And you folks have got to get these things seriously in your brain. If you want freedom and you want a homestead, you want a situation to where you are, you can do pretty much what you want. And that is the absolute truth. I don't have to get one building permit for these homes I build. If I really didn't want to, I'm not forced. In some of the states that we live in, we choose and pick the states we live in because of their laws that are regulating society. And you have to also look. I didn't get into this last night, but I want to stress it to you over and over again. When you look in a state, you want to look in the counties of that state, because not all counties are regulated the same. You've got to make sure that you have elbow space and enough freedom to do. You do not want to move to a state that's going to regulate your water and regulate your ability to grow food. You all have read enough history, right? You know how Hitler took over Europe? He took control of the farmers. He took control of the food sources. And when you start seeing politicians sticking their nose into your private business, you better think differently and you better get out. Because you cannot rise up. I mean, these dear folks out there where I'm staying with, they got all these signs up and down the road. They want to take the farmland away from the people and put houses on it. Do you know what? They're going to lose. They're going to lose because the politicians that have the big bucks, they don't care about, they forget where their food comes from. It doesn't come from Walmart. Is that right? They're going to eventually create such a situation that they're going to have mass starvation whether they like it or not. Yeah. So when we talk about homesteading, my mind goes in weird places. I just think differently, and it took me a year. I mean, I said it last night, y'all need to be born again. And spiritually, yes, but on this subject, we need a new mindset. We need to think differently. I cannot give that to you. I can only try to stimulate and encourage you on this level of education when it comes down to homesteading. You know, I ask the question over and over again, why do you want to discuss homesteading? I bet you we'd get a variety of answers in this room. Maybe I ought to open up the floor for a few moments and ask them, you give me a reason why you want me to discuss with you. Is it for entertainment? Because if it's for entertainment, I'm going out that door. I'm not interested in entertaining people. If you really are serious about what you're thinking, I would like to know, why do you have an interest in homesteading? A lot of folks have an interest and they fail to homestead properly because they leave because of that Spirit moving them to do it. But they don't prepare. They don't even have a mindset to think. They bring their city life right out there in the country with them. And when things get hard, they weird out. And mama starts griping and complaining because she's got to go out and split her kindling because the husband's out there trying to wrestle up the cattle. You know what I mean? And she's got one of these fancy little fingernails and these lily pad hands that comes out of the city, and they're going like, what am I doing here? You know what I mean? Homesteading is not for the light of heart, I'm telling you. So if I scare you off, it's for a reason. It is not for the light of heart, I'm telling you. It is a lot of work, it's a lot of commitment, and it's a lot of dedication to stick with it. You cannot start this project. And another thing, count the cost before you ever do it. And I'm not just talking about finances. You make sure, as we discuss some of these things, that if you're married, that you're on board together. You don't want to go into this lifestyle with a companion barking and belly aching at you or saying, I've had enough of it, I'm going back to the city to get a work. You know what I mean? Make sure your companion is on board. I am thankful that my wife has been always on board, and I've drug her through the mud, people. I am not kidding you, because Ron has been a force to contend with for years. He's getting older and he's slowing down some. And my whole family got drug. I didn't even bring any of the slides of it, but we used to live off the land with total draft horses. I farmed the ground the old way that was 150 years ago. Put up our hay the old way. We had a big, huge barn, and it was all loose hay that was put up there, and I ran and plowed fields with these big, giant draft horses, the Belgian draft horses. That's what my children grew up on that farm. And all 4 of my children are hard-working kids. They weren't out there going, oh man, I'm getting a lot of exercise, you know. I'm shocked. I don't live in this world, folks. And that's the honest truth. Everybody, I was on the plane, and I bet you I was the only one on the plane that didn't have a phone in their hand going. We have become so technically tied up with technology, I'm not real sure we're capable. You hear me? You know, to run these things, it costs lots of money, doesn't it? All these things that your life is so attached to has got to be detached from your brain. It really does. You just have to think differently and work differently and everything else. So now, where's my little clicker at? All right. Thank you. So, I know there's some new faces in here and haven't been here, I don't think. Maybe I'm wrong, and if I am, sorry. But we talked last night about our sheltering system. I want to just barely skim back through that a little bit for those that are new this evening, or this evening I guess it is, isn't it? And again, when you talk about shelter on a homestead, look for the land, look how the land lays, Take a shovel with you, ask a lot of questions, and look at what the soil is like and how the soil lays, how the land lays. What resources do you have on the land that you're wanting to purchase? Every homestead throughout history has always had a homestead that had a woodlot. They always had a place to where they could get their wood because they didn't have electricity. They weren't heating their house with central air and heat. So they had to have a woodlot that meant everything to them because their food that was cooked from that woodlot. It meant everything. It wasn't just their woodlot for firewood, it's a woodlot for building materials. There's a lot of, I don't know what it's like out here anymore, but this country out here has just totally changed since I was a kid. But back there, it's still like you're living 50, 60 years back behind times, and I am thankful for that because you can go find these little local sawmills right next door that'll cut your lumber for you pretty cheap, and you can build all your outbuildings with it, your barns and your sheds and all these things. And that facility of your woodlot means everything to a homestead. It's very, very necessary. The other thing that's very necessary on a homestead is making sure that you have proper ground to be able to grow. Now I'm going to tell you, again, I don't know where you all are at, and I suppose that's left up to you folks. But if you're really thinking about homesteading, I mentioned last night that one of the things that we have to think is if the electricity shuts off, what does that mean? I asked my brother that and his friend, and we were chatting. We stopped somewhere along that bike trail and stopped there and was just chatting. And I asked him the question, I said, what would happen if today in Sacramento, not in the rest of the state, but in the state of Sacramento, or in the city of Sacramento, the area all around it, if your electricity was shut off today, what would that mean to you all? Do you all have any idea what that means? Most of us don't think that way because we've grown up in it and we're so detached from reality that we just think it's going to be there forever. Is that right? I said, Ken, if your power's shut off, do you think you're going to go down to the gas station and get gas for your vehicle to drive out of this state? Forget it. Forget it. Do you think you're going to go down to Walmart to go get food when you can't even get the doors open because they're all controlled by electricity? Much less the lights and the air conditioning. How long do you think that food's going to last in that store with no air conditioning? It's going to overheat and it's going to rot. Huh? You remember our discussion yesterday about Jerusalem and what happened to Jerusalem and how they were eating their own children? That's historical records. And how the children were eating their parents. When they were trapped in that city and they could not get out or get in, it didn't take long for chaos to take over. So, when you think of a homestead, you've got to make sure that you have adequate land to be able to grow enough food for at least one season. What does that mean to you? Enough food. You don't have Walmart. You don't have, what's the name of that other big organic store out here? Costco's. You don't have Costco's. You don't have any of these stores where you don't even have anywhere like Azure Standard that comes up out of Oregon that carries all their organic stuff all over the United States. You don't have any of those anymore. You don't have the ability to buy it because everything goes to a crunch. You do know that is a real potential problem. I'm not an alarmist, friends. I don't think in alarmist mentality. I'm thinking in reality. I don't want to live in a system and being trapped where it's so interdependent upon the system that's been created that can be shut down like that. Every major nation in the world has been destroyed when they can take control of their systems. You want enough land to be able to grow enough food, and we're going to be discussing that here shortly. Enough food to feed yourselves. And I'm not talking about delicacy type of foods. I'm talking about survival type of foods that will carry you through, because let me tell you something, folks. You're going to need a lot of carbohydrates. We watched this, it wasn't a movie, it was a documentary. And we don't do a lot of that stuff, but there was this program that my wife saw. It was about, it was up in the upper New England states somewhere, and I don't remember which state it was in. It was one of the universities. And they had a group in that university that wanted to understand this whole mindset of homesteading. So they started studying the 1700s and the early 1800 homesteads. Well, they went out there, and it was a 5-year study. All right? I would have loved to have been on a study like that, but so what they did is, what they found out is, they started out with a regular American mindset, if you know what I mean. They would sit there and they would eat their regular meals that they were used to eating, and they couldn't even get to noon. They were so burnt out because they weren't consuming enough calories. You have no clue. If you've never been on a homestead, if there's some of you folks in here, no. You don't go out there and do hard work on forgetting breakfast. You know what I'm saying? So when you're thinking homestead, you got to think of the land, what kind of soil you're looking at, and how much food production. I remember living in Central America. I was back in my hippie years, and I went down there, and everything that we grew off that place, we had to eat because we didn't have Walmart down in Central America. We were 15 miles back into the mountains. And if you didn't grow it, you just went without. So we're going to discuss when we get into this food thing, is when you're looking at a piece of land, make sure that that land has adequate ground to be able to grow enough food for at least one season. That's 12 months. In fact, I'll tell you the honest truth, it's going to last you about a year and a half, because it's going to take you another 6 months to start getting another harvest. So, when you talk about shelter, we're looking at having a home that's simple, it's easy, it's well insulated, it's easy to maintain. And, someone was asking me the question, do you sell these homes? I said, well, yes, I do, but I don't necessarily build them for the public just to sell. I am a builder. I've done building, and I've done farming, and I've done all kinds of things because I like doing a lot of things. I like to know a lot of things, and that's one thing about a homesteader. A homesteader needs to have a lot of talent. And if you don't have a lot of talent, start getting a lot of talent. Get some good books out. Go to your libraries. Learn how to can. Learn how to sew. Learn how to do things that you're not accustomed to. Take this time that you have now and use it wisely, and get on the computer and you can find everything. What's that? Was the battery weak? I know nothing about a battery. and I don't know anything about computers. If you give me a hoe and a hammer and a shovel, honey, I'll get it done. When it comes to these things, it's all over with. All right. So you want to find the situation. I showed you these pictures last night. Within that situation of your shelter, you want to make sure you have adequate outbuildings that will handle your firewood. And depending on the size of your house is the amount of firewood you're going to be able to produce and put out. Generally, my homes that I build, it takes about 3 cords, and that's 3 ricks. A rick is 8 feet long, 4 feet tall, and whatever the width of your wood is. And it takes a fair good amount of wood for a whole 1-year season until you get to the next season. So you want a building that will be a place to keep your firewood out of the weather. All right? And then you said something about... Well, the rick, it's called a rick. It's 8 feet long, 4 feet tall, and 16 inches usually wide is the length of your firewood. And so in my house, I require at least 3 cords, and every cord has 3 ricks in it. And every bit of that rick, I don't have to go to a gymnasium and work out, believe me, brethren. When you go out to split that amount of firewood, I don't have one of those gas-powered electric ones because I don't want to get used to the grid.
You said there were 3 things to look for. You said woodland, ground grow, and was 3 the outbuildings, or was there a third?
No, the whole 3 we're going to look at. The whole 3, when you're dealing with homestead mindset, you're looking at shelter. That is your living facility, whether it's for your livestock, whether it's for you, or whether it's for your firewood or your chickens or whatever it is. You want to be looking as your homestead, your home. That's your first thing you're looking at, your shelter. The second thing you want to look at in looking for homestead is what kind of water do you have? Where do you get your water? Where is the source of water? And etc. And we're going to talk about that shortly. But with that, what you also, the third one is your Walmart. Your food production. You want to learn the art of growing food and how to put food up and how to put it up properly so that it will work and be there for the next season. You are going to depend upon the food you grow, friends. Now let's hope it doesn't come that fast. Let's hope you still can go to Walmart and get food. You know what I mean? But we've got to think on this level of what happens if the grid does fall apart. We've got to have the ability, and that means when we think of this, we've got to think of those 3 areas. The largest area that you're going to be working at, and we're going to work on the most, is your food production. And as I was saying to you, a homestead, this college up there in New England states, they found that they were burning out because they were not consuming amount. Let me ask you all a question. How much calories some of us definitely consume more calories in this room than some of us. All right? It's around 2,000 to 2,500 calories is the average consumption of calories on a general American lifestyle, all right? And some of us don't need that much. And some of us need more because some of us are more hyper and some of us aren't so hyper. And so some of us burn fat off and energy off easier and faster than others. But in spite of that, this group found out at about a 2,500 calorie diet a day, they were going down the tubes. They stepped their calories up eventually to 5,000 calories a day. We watched this program and I was blown away. I said, where are they putting that food? And when I first started homesteading, I could not figure. When we really went back to the homesteading, I was telling you I was working draft horses and we were doing everything the old-fashioned way. We didn't have tractors. We didn't have all the balers. We didn't have all those things because most of the farmers of America today look this big around because they sit in these great big old tractors and don't do anything anymore but pull a button or a lever. Well, you didn't see a bunch of heavy-duty farmers in the years gone by because they were burning calories big time. And we learned that when we went to I was a typical you. I grew up in a city mindset. And when we went to the land, I had no clue. And I couldn't figure out why in the world am I burning out? I'd get angry, I would get edgy, and I would get nasty, and I would start yelling, and I wanted to hit and kick and everything else because my blood sugar was dropping out of the door. You ever hear of hypoglycemia? Well, I didn't have hypoglycemia, but I was burning up everything like hypoglycemia, and I was burning up so many calories that I would just get shaky and edgy. Well, when I started consuming more calories and more calories, all that started disappearing. And when I watched that film on this program I was telling you all about, that's exactly what they experienced. I told Chris, amen, I hear them loud and clear. So one of the things you need to really think is don't worry about your little girly figure anymore. If you're going to the homestead, let me tell you something. You go back in yesteryear, and I know I shouldn't be doing this, and shame on me, throw a book at me and shut me up. Those women of yesteryear and those men of yesteryear were something else. I've gone back and I've studied and I've looked, and you get the pictures of these women, and they weren't like these little Barbie dolls. You hear me? Because they were consuming these women would crush your hand when they shake your hand. Hello. I mean, they put you on your knees. You're going like, honey, quit. Because they were used to milking a cow or 2 or 3 or goats. And they worked hard with their hands. They were cultivating. They were harvesting. They were doing all kinds of things that physically didn't need a gymnasium to go do. Their gymnasium was the great outdoors. And I'm going to tell you something, folks. If you want your health to improve, you move to the land. You move to the land and you're going to find all your mental problems going out the door. You won't have time to have a mental problem. All your boo-hooing is going to go down the road. You don't have time to boo-hoo. So, when you're looking at a homestead and you're looking at your home and your facility, make sure that it's a simple, practical home that works and works well. We talked about that last night, and so I'm going to try to get away from that for a moment. Now, water. These are 2 different homes. There's our wood lot. Okay, this is only just the beginning. I'm just going to show you one picture. This here was a development of a spring, and probably not too many of us here in this area, but when you buy a piece of land, you want to make sure that you understand in dealing with water, water is essential. You cannot live very long without water. And a homestead will not survive without water. You've got to have water. And so when you look at your land or look for a piece of land, think again, if the grid falls apart today, how are you going to get a water? You know what I mean? You've got to think about if it falls apart, and let's pray again that it doesn't fall apart real soon. But think about tomorrow or down the road a piece. When you look at a piece of land, go and look and ask and be snoopy. When I buy a piece of land, the first thing I say, I take my shovel. I said, I hope y'all don't mind, but I'm going to bring a shovel along with me. I'm going to go all over the place, and I'm going to dig up the holes. I want to know what that soil's like. I don't want a rock bed to work with. The other thing I then ask directly is I want to know what is the water source. What is the water like around this territory? Do you have a chemical dump down the road that's poisoning your water table underground? I think I was just talking to, so was it you last night you and I were talking? Would you stand up and tell them what you told me about that situation, that place you were looking at? Now you listen to what he has to say. It's important when we talk about water. You think of what this brother is going to say.
I'll try to make it, hello everyone, I'll try to make it very short, not to take of the time. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
It's a couple of years we're looking to buy something outside, and everybody has different plans in mind for the size of the place. We find the size that we like, was about 90 acres, and we found the price that was good for us. We find the financial to do that, and then when we get to the water side, because we have a checklist that we check, and then when we got to the water side, I observed that the people over there, they have bottle of waters, drinking from the bottles. And I asked them, what's going on? And they said, oh, it's nothing to worry about, but we prefer the bottling water better than the water from the ground. And then we do our due diligence. You can go to the county. You can find out more about the piece of property. I spoke with Brother Randy last week. For whosoever met him, he said you can go to a title company, and because they give you title insurance, they would like to secure you as a customer, and they'll give you extra information about that piece of property that you don't get sometimes. So we went to my wife, we went to the county, we found that the place was in foreclosure, we found who the owner is, who's gonna go. We did our part. And then we found that long time ago, I don't know, maybe 60, 80 years, was a turkey farm. And when they're processing the turkey, maybe these days they take that leftovers from the processing plant, and maybe they sell to a pet food company. But at that time, they dig holes in the ground and they bury that material. That material was leaking into the water source as nitrites, making the water not drinkable. The people that they own that piece of land, they dig another well, a new one, deeper, and the water was good for a while. And by the time we came to buy the place, the second well was at the edge of contamination that was not drinkable. I talked in Europe about the levels of nitrites in the water, and they said, we don't have such a thing, only in the United States. That means they're even more tolerant. That doesn't mean it's healthy, it just means they're ignorant. And then we did our own test, they did their own test, and then it's important when you put the offer to make sure that you have clauses in there that you can walk out. And one of those things was, in order for us to recover the down payment, was that if the water is drinkable, we're gonna stand by our money offer. If it's not, we're gonna walk out. And their test was for the water that is not drinkable. So it was for us to take a risk to dig another well, and hopefully we're gonna have good water. I don't know what happened, we walked out. But that's something for you to keep in mind, because you can find good deal, but might not be good deal all the way. Right. Thank you. Yeah,
thank you. So, when we look at land and we're talking about water, that thing's pestering me and I don't like it. does this thing get up there? Oh, technology, isn't it wonderful? It's still going to bother me. Well, okay, when we're talking about water, you got to think of these things. Your water means everything to you, and it's got to be water that you can properly use. Now, there are different filter systems that have the ability to filter a lot of stuff out. And we use a Berkey water filter ourselves. It's called Berkey. And it's on the countertop kind of filtering system. And it will filter out septic water. I mean, it's that good that you can drink and use septic water if you absolutely had to. That's how powerful this filtering system is.
Ron, I just wanted to know about the train derailment in Palestine. Do you know how that affects?
I can't hear you.
The train derailment that happened several months
Oh, yes.
How does that affect the American water supply?
Up in that territory? See, that's what's so bad, brother. You know what's so terrible? And now you're going to get me on a box and you're not going to like it. These areas just aggravate the stuffings out of me because I've been an organic produce farmer for years. And there was a reason why. Is it too loud?
What's the question?
Oh, the question is about this train derailment that went off. It was in Ohio, I believe.
Palestine, Ohio.
Yes. And what was the effect of that derailment on the water source in that territory? Well, I'm going to tell you something. If that derailment was our only problem, I would say that's not too bad. You know? What that was just a little chemical dump.
It was huge.
I know. But you know where there's a bigger chemical dump? You're living in it. The San Joaquin Valley produces more produce in anywhere in the United States, and this place is 95% inorganic. Do you know what that means for the water table? Those chemicals don't leave the soil, my friend. They can be there 25 and 30. We looked at a piece of land a few years ago, and we checked a lot of things out, and we started finding out there were people ended up with cancer of all kinds, and no one could figure out what in the world was going on. There was an Amish community in this area. These were what they call old order Amish. They lived totally off the land and horse and buggy and all that business. And these people were coming up with cancer of all kinds. The destruction of the thyroid in men and women. Breast cancer shouldn't happen with women that breastfeed their children. You know, this was horrendous. Well, we went to the county seat and we started doing some, it got them really upset with us, but I said, look, folks, this is not right. I said, I'm a physician by my training, and I know people don't get cancer just because you blow on them with air. I said, what in the world? Well, we went back 25 to 30 years before, and you know what was sprayed all over those mountainsides? Agent Orange. You know what Agent Orange is? You know why a lot of our men that came out of Vietnam were dying of all kinds of conditions? Because they sprayed the jungle of Vietnam with Agent Orange. It's called Roundup. Now you're getting me on a story you don't want me to go on. But you're living in a chemical dump. From Bakersfield to Redding. And everything in between.
And the sprays that they put on their...
Oh, girl, I mean, it's unbelievable. So when you think about homesteading, you've got to think differently. You've got to think of your environment. You've got to think of where you're going to live. What happened with that situation? They're still dealing with it up there. They're still dealing with that chemical dump that happened up there, and it was all planned and programmed. That was not an accident. You know, it was in Ohio, yeah. And there's some gorgeous country in Ohio. And it's one of those states that you can homestead on and do really well, but you've got to make sure of what in the world's going on in your environment around about you. Don't be lazy and just say, wow, that's a nice piece of land. Check things out. It's really, really, really important. Those poor people, they're going to have 25 to 30 years down the road of all kinds of things that are going to happen to them. It's just like this, It's just like this COVID situation. People have no idea that you became a chemical dump. Simply because, see, I told you I wasn't supposed to talk politics. My wife said, Ron, you stay away from that. And I'm going to tell you something. It ain't right. It is not right. And and until we all do something about it, we're just going to still be used as the guinea pigs. And I don't like being used as a guinea pig. I don't know about y'all, but I have a hard time with it. So water. I'll get off that and go back to water. Water is super, super important because in your water source, look on your land that you're going to purchase, whether you have springs, a good stream, what's upland where the stream comes from, whether it's spring fed or not, what's up ahead of you, 10, 15, 20 miles, what's coming down that stream. You need a good water source. And if you have to have a well or a well put in, make sure that you have the water tested, that the water is good on that place. And then you've got to think of how you're going to get that water up out of that well, or how you're going to get it from the spring or a stream or whatever. And when we talk about those things, there are all kinds of really nice off-grid type of systems that can be used. If you have solar, I don't want to do that. I was going to flip to the end. The end film or end picture shows my solar system. I forgot it was on there. It should have been with the housing, but it got to the end. We'll see it later. But if you have solar, then there's all kinds of options to be able to work. I'm building on this homestead where we're at now. Right now, I'm working on finishing. That's trapping the spring on our place. Doesn't look like that anymore. You don't even know it's there because it's all covered up. But it's being trapped into a 500-gallon tank. It's running about 2 gallons a minute. Do you know what 24 hours, 2 gallons a minute works out? That's a lot of water. You'll never use it all. And it's just 2, and I have 7 springs on this property. And so I said, well, I'm going to trap the best one, and that's what I did. And so I'm in the process of right now getting that 500-gallon tank with a submergible pump in it that runs off my solar system, and it's pressurized just like a normal home. Or if you have a situation where you have a good enough gravity flow, you can use what's called a hydraulic ram pump. It works completely on water flow. You have to have at least 5 foot of fall to get this thing to pump, and it'll pump over 1.5 miles that direction, and it'll pump up to 400 feet up in the air with no electricity, just water. Hydraulic ram pump. There's a number of, you can look online, they have a number of companies now. The one we used to use was from Davy, but Davy doesn't exist anymore. Rife Ram is another company. So there's all kinds of situations that can help you. Now, with that situation on all your old homesteads, there was something they had right not far from the house and from the barn and from your livestock. And you know what that was? It was a water tower. They built a water tower, and at the top of that water tower, it was raised up high enough so that that water could be pumped up into the tank, and it was usually like a 500-gallon tank, and it held the water, and it created its own pressure by starting with like a 4-inch line down to a 3-inch, down to a 2-inch, down to a 1-inch, and down to a 3/4 inch. And by the time it got to your house, it would shoot you out of the bathtub. Yeah. Totally off-grid, totally independent, not dependent on nothing but to get the water up there into the tank. And it's easy to be done. So when we talk about these things, think about those concepts to where if you have to build a water tower, it has to be at least, the bottom of the tank has to be at least the height of your gutter of your house. If it's a 1-story house, then you want it to be at least at the bottom of the gutter level. All right? Because your bathtub is going to be 8 feet down from that. Is that not right? If you're doing an 8-foot wall, not 10-foot ceilings, you're going to have a good water pressure so that you can run a shower. I mean, nobody wants to go in these old not cast iron tubs, but these old feed troughs and try to take a bath. I mean, y'all seen Little House on the Prairie, surely. Give the idea they got a bathtub out there by a big wood stove and took a bath. Well, if that's what you want, great, do it. But you can make your life simpler and enjoy life and not have to haul the wood into the tub. By the time Junior got done, the water was brown. All right? So, build a water tower. Get online and learn the art of good water towers. And again, depending on where you live, what country you're living in, is how well you need to insulate that water tower to make sure it doesn't freeze. And not just freeze, you want it to be insulated well so it doesn't get too hot. You don't want the sun baking that tank and heating your water up so you have lukewarm water all the time. You want cold water to drink, etc., etc. You follow what I'm saying? So think along those lines when we talk about water and we talk about your shelter. Think about the shelter for your water. That is a water tower. I was very fortunate on all the farms that we've had up to this one here that we always had a lifted up place to where we could put our water tank up on the hillside and it would gravity flow back down to the house and we had all the pressure you would want. I mean, you know the neat thing of it is the way we're living right now, you would think that we were living on the grid. We have been working for so long to get where we're at today because when you walk into our home, it's just as lit up as this is. Completely, I don't know Uncle Bill no more. I have no electric bills. Bill went down the road. But we have all the facilities and all the benefits. My wife doesn't have to go on a scrub board and wash her clothes. She has a regular washing machine. When we started out, let me tell you something, it was what they called a James washer. You put it in there, you pour your water in there, and you shake the shaker. 9, 10, 50 times later, and finally your agitator got the clothes a little bit clean. It was called a James washer. That's how we started out. Well, now we got lazy. And my wife's got a good washing machine, and it washes our clothes quite nice. So you can do it. You can have a homestead that's very comfortable, even though you're going to have a lot of work. So water is very, very important to you and every way. Not just to you if you're going to have livestock. It's very important that you have adequate amount of water. Now, with that in mind, think of, if you're going to have livestock, I believe every homestead ought to have livestock. And I don't care whether you eat them or don't eat them. I don't eat animals. I don't like eating animals. I've been a Anyways, shut up.
Before you get on the livestock, what do you do for hot water?
Well, there's all kinds of methods. I'm glad you brought that up. Did you hear what he asked?
Hot water.
How do you get hot water? Well, I'm going to tell you, I live in the South. And in the summer, I don't want any hot water. Because it's cooking hot back there, and you've got super humidity. When you get 90-degree weather, you've got 15 to 20% humidity that can go all the way up to 90% humidity, and that sets you up at about 105 degrees. All right? So when I take a shower, I don't want any water. I don't want lukewarm. I don't want any of that. But when it comes down to the winter or the spring or the cooler months, we have in our wood cook stove what's called a convection coil. You heard of that? A lot of our homes that we've built, all of our stoves have always had a convection coil in the stove, and it's plumbed into a hot water tank that would be up above the stove because hot water, hot heat rises, and it naturally convects. It naturally does a circulation through this coil and back up into the tank until that tank will start going tick, 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 tick. You ever been around a boiler? Yeah. And it has these little pop-off valves, but if it gets too hot, it's going to release the excess pressure so it doesn't blow up like a bomb. But they have companies right now that are producing all these products for homesteaders. It's all coming back, folks. You can get these hot water heaters that are made specifically for off-grid living. We didn't have them back when we started, but we do now. So you can have all the hot water you want. And if you want hot water in the summer, set it up in your cookhouse to where you have a stove out there that you're going to be cooking off with a convection coil that also works to where you have hot water. Even if you have to have a bathtub out there or a shower out there in a separate little room, you know, if you want hot water to wash dishes or take a bath or whatever, you can set your homestead up and your homes up in such a way that you can have all the conveniences. It's just going to take you a little more work. But they do have online, you can look it up, wood cook stoves, and these wood cook stoves, and one of the wood cook stoves we like is called Kitchen Queen. It's one of the top of the line wood cook stoves. And it has the convection coil in it and all the business and hot water tanks and everything. And you can buy it from the company that produces that stove. Now, Kitchen Queen. Now, there's all kinds of different ones. Get online and look. There's some cheaper ones. This one is about $3,800. It's an expensive one, but it is a high-quality stove. All right? Excuse me? Well, you can, yes. If you have access to natural gas, you know, we also have what we call propane backup. You know, and we have enough propane that would last us up to 3 years. If there was a shutdown, we would at least have, if we used conservatively, we would have that propane or natural gas, if you have natural gas, and we use what's called the tankless heater, which is, you know, the on-demand hot water heater, as well as a backup when you're not using your wood stove. Now, there's all kinds of different ideas or ways you can go at it. You know, I'm just giving you the ultimate total off-grid, no buying, no selling kind of thing. But yeah, you can set yourself up. There's even hot water heaters that run off of solar systems. But those hot water heaters are very demanding on the solar system, so you've got to be very careful. Or if you have the money, build you a big enough solar system that you don't have to worry about it, all right? And we'll talk about that after a while. Now, I don't know, what time am I supposed to let these people get a break? I left my little thing there. Before we get in, is there anything else you want to look at up to this point? Okay, that's a spring that's that's coming out of the side of the hill. That hill comes down at about a 45 to 50 degree angle like this. You see that where that pipe is, there's a rock shelf that comes across there. And I dug that out, okay? I went down there with the Maddox and a shovel, and I got some more gymnasium exercise. And I dug all that dirt away to find the head of the spring. And because it was coming out of there and it was going onto that rock shelf, and it was just pouring out like this all over. I mean, that whole rock shelf goes way over there like that, and way over this way over here. And so I centered where the head of the spring was coming out, and I took that and dug it out. And then there's that blue thing you see is from a 55-gallon drum, a food quality 55-gallon drum, plastic. I cut it off and made a dam is what I did. And then you can get a concrete that's quick. It's like real quick setting for sealing basements in cracks and water leakage and stuff like that. And I sealed it all the way around the bottom of that little dam. And all of a sudden that water started going. I just filled up behind that blue dam. That's what you call gravel in there. And that tube goes back in through that dam, back into the hillside, and it's perforated with all kinds of holes in it. And that water that builds up, it comes through that, all right? And it traps it and it carries it through that tube, and then it's catching it right there. This was during a period of drought where we weren't hardly getting much rain at all. And we were still running 1.5 gallons a minute of water. And now, which I didn't bring the pictures of, I come from that tube right there, and that tube comes down to another shelf, and it's set up in a 5-gallon drum that has a filtering system to filter out the sediment. And then from that filtering system, another line runs down to my 500-gallon tank. And that's catching all the water we'll ever use and ever need to use for our household use and whatnot. So, no, my tank, if this picture, I was in line with that picture over here, my tank would be sitting right here. And it's below that spring. The head of it, of my tank, is probably 2 feet to 3 feet below the height of this spring. It's semi-buried into the ground. It's a black poly, and it's semi-buried into the ground so that the water stays cool. It's down in what we call in the South a holler. Y'all heard of a holler? It's down in a holler to where it's all tree growth, and it sits down in here where it stays nice and cool. And so that's where our water source is coming from. Yeah. So that's a trapping a spring. Now, another thing before I get off of this water thing is when you think of building your homes or you look for a home, make sure that home is simple enough. This one here is that 1,800 square foot home. And you can see up on the upper roof system, it's on the back. The back of this house and the front of this house is exactly alike. If you turned it around, you'd almost think the back looked like the front, all but the doors and windows maybe. But now, at that top level, there's a gutters on there. And then the bottom on the porch, on the back of the house and on the front of the house, there are gutters. They are the industrial-sized gutters. They are not the little 4-inch gutters. They're more like 6 to 8 inches. They're a nice big gutter. And they catch the rain. And you can have a light rain, friend, and you will be shocked how much water you can collect from a small 2 to 3 hour rain. All right? Oh, we're going to get there. Now, The other thing we're thinking about, both of these houses, that one alike, is based on that same house without a two-story. This is a single-story house, and this is a two-story house. They're set up very similar. Because this was more for a larger family, you want more water catching. When you're just a couple or a small family, that one-story house will work perfectly for them, and it'll catch all the water you'll ever need. Now, on this house here, just like that one, because they're similar, you see the downspouts coming off the gutters. I haven't got to it because I really don't need it with what we're doing here. Because we have the springs, we have all the water we will ever need. But if you don't have adequate water, you need to learn how to have a catchment system that catches rainwater. One of the things you need to think about is the way you have your roof shingled or tiled or roofed. We use a 30-year warranty painted metal. And that painted metal runs the water off without any trash that goes down into your system. The other thing is think very seriously about when you're building your home or you're buying a home, that you're not in a pile of woods. If you build a home in the woods, you're asking for mold problems. And that mold problem will gather on your roof system and it'll go into your water tank. And you will poison yourself and you won't be able to figure out why I'm so sick. Build your home where you have a lot of sunshine to keep all those problems down. Make sure your roofing is a metal roofing. And take those downspouts, and I didn't do it on this house either because we didn't need it. But if you did it, you'd take these downspouts that come down, you'd take that gutter, and in that house, you would lean that gutter from one end of the house to the next at a little bit of an angle. All the water would run down here to this end, to that downspout. You'd take the back downspout and the front downspout, and you would turn them in like this, and come across the bottom of the house right here, and your tank would sit right there in that ground, in that grass. You bury it, a 3,000-gallon tank, or whatever size of tank you want to get. And then you have 3,000 gallons of free water. And then you can put your pump. People are doing this all the time, folks. And they're running hand pumps on their countertop, that you use a hand pump like this that has its source coming right out of that tank.
You said it 3,000 gallons?
Well, you can do 3,000, you can do 1,000 gallons, you can do whatever you want, depending on the needs that you have. But you can at least have that ability to have a water catchment system. They even have now, and I'll get to you, they even have now in the grid system, the off-the-grid systems, to where you can buy actual filters that go into your guttering system that filters out any trash. We didn't have all those things years ago. When our bigger homestead, we had a 3,000-gallon cistern that was in the basement, that all of our gutters were running into it and went into that 3,000-gallon cistern. Now just remember, if you're doing a water catchment system, that you want to make sure that you have an overflow in that tank going to a lower space, because you're going to get to the point where that tank's going to get real full. And you've got to have somewhere for that excess to go. So build you a pond. Build you a pond somewhere and let the excess be caught and go into a pond that may be feeding fish or whatever. And then you have a pond that you have for the use of irrigation for your food sources or your livestock or whatever it might be. Again, so you're having to think off-grid mindset. What's that? Well, you can pump it all kinds of ways. You can get out there on a bicycle. I've done it. But generally now, everybody's gone to solar power. Let me tell you something, folks. We live in a time that it's time for off-gridders to get their act together. There are so many sources out there. When I started this over 40-something years ago, my goodness gracious, there was hardly nothing out there. But today, you can get online and you can find all kinds of solar systems where you can set up 2 solar panels down there by your little old pond, and that pump is run by those 2 solar panels and a little unit of banks of batteries. And you can pump it right into a pressurized system, and you can run sprinklers off of it if you wanted to. Yeah. You can do windmills, you can do all kinds of things if you just think off the grid mindset. Okay, now, I think you get the drift. It is capable of being done. You can do it if you just have a little grit and put your mindset to it. Now, let's take a break, and we'll come back for the rest of the story. All right, is everybody ready to move forward? Or maybe it sounds like we're moving backwards. All right, this thing's a little bit loud. 'Cause I know my voice, and if I get to talking there, that's a little better. Is that loud enough for everybody? All right. We're going to move forward out of these pictures. Whoops, wrong way. Or is that? Nope, it goes that way. All right. This is my favorite part. I love to grow food. All right. When we start dealing again with homesteading, and this thing is a little too loud, someone needs to turn this thing down because I'm going to really tear some ears up. All right. Is it better? The echo's not so horrendous. Okay. Food production. We look at food production and we're looking at a really big area. I mean, it's the food production that actually keeps you on a homestead. You all do know that, right? Because if you don't have food, you're not going to stay on a homestead. And one of the things about a homestead is that, generally speaking, these homesteads grew most everything they used. And it wasn't just for themselves, it was for their livestock as well. So when we start talking about food production, there's a section of this that I don't even have up there, and it's not even dealing with livestock production, all right? Because that's a whole nother story when it comes down to production of products just to keep your workhorses or your goats or your chickens fed. You understand that, right? Because if you're going to have some livestock, you're going to have food. You're not going to have the farm co-op to go down there and get feed. Is that right? So you've got to have a way to be able to produce enough food for yourself as well as for, we don't have gas stations anymore, right? They're all gone. It will come. I don't know whether it'll come in our time, and I hope it really doesn't, because I don't look forward to it. But the fact of the matter is, I don't want to be on a plane and fall out of the sky either. So I hope the gas stays around for a little while. But the day is coming that the potential of not having it is very real. So you've got to think of how you're going to work the land. Now, some of us, I know we got into this big old discussion over here in the corner, and I thought I was going to be able to sit down and take a rest, but I didn't get to do that. But the big old discussion came around, and it was over this idea of there's a lot of us are getting to be elderly. Now, there was a day I wouldn't have said that because I thought that was kind of not too nice. But you know what? I'm getting to be an elder. Oh, and I don't like it. I never thought I'd see the day that I'd be 70 years old doing what I'm doing. I'm thankful that I've got the health I have, and I'm thankful I've got the education I have and the abilities I have. I have a lot to be thankful for, and that is the honest truth. The biggest thing I'm thankful for is all of you. You've been a great blessing to me, and you just don't know that. So I appreciate this opportunity to be able to share these things with you. Now, when we talk about food production, we're going to look at food production, and I'm going to try to remember this sister over there in the corner, her question last night. You remember what it was? It had to deal with food production. And we're going to look at some of these things. I don't have a lot of those pictures. In fact, I don't have any of those pictures on this slide production, but you're going to get a drift. One of the things that I have seen on farmsteads that I think was lacking with a lot of farmsteads or homesteads is that they'll go to the country and they'll go to the homestead and they get kind of in a situation, unless there's some of us elderly people that have made a good living over a long time and have a good bank account and can live on that bank account for a period of time, or they have Social Security or whatever. Not everybody has that. And some of us are young enough that it's not going to come in your time frame. And that's the truth. In fact, the truth of the matter is if you don't have a bank account, you're not going to have a Social Security account either. Because Social Security right now is in big, big trouble. Yeah, it's reality. You know why that is? Because when they did what they did with COVID, and I told you I wasn't going to do this, but I can't help myself again. They did the COVID testing and the COVID Ronald trial. What they did is they killed a certain population of people that have never come back on the scene again, and it was the younger working force. Across this country, do you know that my Social Security was coming from those younger families that are working? No matter what I paid in Social Security, my Social Security was paying for my grandmother's Social Security and my mother's Social Security. But now there's a super huge gap between this generation paying for my Social Security, which a lot of us in this room are about my age. Is that right? So, wake up, everybody. It's not a pretty picture. And I'm not going to lie to you. When I was in private practice, one of the things I learned to do, I was straightforward with my patients. You're dying. Prepare your heart for Jesus to come. You're going to the grave. As hard as that is to tell people, you cannot lie to somebody and then all of a sudden it hits them and they realize, man, that doctor was lying to me. Is that right? This system is falling apart. And whatever we do, we've got to as fast as we can possibly do it. Food production is homestead or your farmstead. Now, one of the things that I said I've seen and I've dealt with a lot of these homesteaders is their lack of ability to understand a homestead. What does a homestead mean to you? Why do you even have an interest in it? You know, you keep hearing me say that, but none of you give me an answer. What if this system didn't fall apart? Would you go and do it anyway? Come on now. Would you be listening to this radical nut job this evening if you knew that the system was going to stay where it's at today? Would you leave Sacramento and get out of here if you knew the Sacramento is going to be 100 years later? I like you. Did you hear her? I'm going to tell you something. You all better get this straight in your head. I can't do that for you. Why do you have an interest in homesteading? I asked myself that years ago when I left a private practice. Ron, what in the world are you doing? There's coming a time, Ron, I'm not going to be able to buy or sell because the system is going to fall apart. I was just a young 16-year-old hippie when I first heard that. I'm 69 years old. That's a long time ago. And here, my wife and I were just talking about this. We're still doing it. Well, I'm not sure. But, you know, we're still doing it. We're still out here. And so, anyways, I can get sidetracked really fast. When we talk about food production, again, what I've seen on a lot of these homesteads is the lack of ability to be a homestead. On a homestead, one of the things that I have learned over my little small years of journey was you're not going out there to survive. Hello? I'll bet you most of you in here have got that in your brain. Is that right? If it falls apart, it's going to fall apart. But if it doesn't fall apart, are you going to stay there? Are you going to live there? Is your heart still there? Are you going, no, I'm going back to Babylon. No, I'm going back to Sodom. I sure liked it there. You hear me? Because you've got to make that. I can't do that for you. And I'm not going to try to convince you because I don't want you coming back on me and saying, oh man, I don't like that guy. I really told us a big bunch of hooey. But I'm going to tell you something. You've got to make that decision in your own minds. It's got to become so part of you in your inner spirit that you live according to the conscience that you have. When I have seen some of these homesteaders, they go out there for the purpose of survival, and that's what we have going on right now. I never did it for survival. I did it because I liked the lifestyle. I love the way we live. I just about love it as much as I love my wife. But I don't love it as much as I love Jesus. Because my homestead isn't my Jesus. It isn't my Savior. And I told you that before. But I sure do love the lifestyle. And I would love to see all of you doing it. Now, when it comes down to food, what you see up there on the board, or up on that, whatever that is up there, is one of our homesteads. It's not the one I'm on now. But it was one of our homesteads, and on that homestead, I was making a very good living right off the homestead. We grew enough food on this homestead for 500 people. Yeah, get your head wrapped around that one. And it was me and my wife. Yes. Yes. We were running 5 acres of food production. And we're going to get into discussing this. What you can do on a small piece of land will blow your minds. It will blow your minds what you can do on a small piece of land. Now I'm going to tell you something. The benefit of getting your head on straight, I don't care what your age is you can grow enough food for excess to be able to sell to your neighbors or to sell if the economy holds for a while. That's one of the things about a homestead, is that a lot of these homesteaders don't have any clue that the homestead is supposed to be a living. It's supposed to be your lifestyle. What are you going to do? What we ended up doing is I started growing a garden, and it was just about the size of that thing right there. That was years and years and years ago. And because I fell in love doing it, I just kept getting bigger and bigger until my wife says, Ron, what are you doing? I said, I don't know. I'm just trying to grow more food. Well, it got to the point where I had so much good excess that I said, well, and that's when I left my private practice, and my wife came to me and says, Ron, what do you really want to do? I said, I want to grow food. And so we left my private practice. I bought a place, and we started growing commercial, smaller at first. And I says, you know, the neat thing of it is we grow all of our own food, and we sell the excess. And we were making enough money to take care of all of our needs as we began to develop the homestead and its business backing. Every farm is a business, folks. You've got to think it as a business. You're not going out there just for survival, but if you're there, use what you got to make an income with it. As long as there's an economy, it's ridiculous not to. There are farmers markets. There is what's called a CSA program, Community Supported Agriculture. We got into the CSA program, and we had 150 membership that was feeding 500 people in that 150 membership. You have no idea what that means unless you've been a part of one. We were running a box of food every week to these people that bought this box. And each one of these boxes cost $35 at 150 boxes a week. You get it? You get it? Yeah, I see your eyeballs lighting up. When I think homestead, that's exactly the way I think. I'm not looking to go out there and survive out in the middle of the boonies just to survive. I think homesteading is the way the pioneers thought about homesteading. They grew a lot of food, not just for their animals, but for sale. And they had all the food they wanted for their own use to put away in their cellars or canning or whatever it was. That piece of ground right there would absolutely shock you, the amount of food that actually is half the field. If you went this way on this field, that field goes way down here, and it's about 2.5 acres. On that 2.5 acres, we were producing enough food for that 150 member CSA. Yeah. And when I talk about a box, we're talking about a half a bushel. You know what a half a bushel is? That's a lot of food. And every week, we were raising 58 varieties of different types of produce. And out of that 58, we had all of our salad for our own salads every day, of every kind, from peppers to tomatoes to cucumbers and all the rest of the goodies. We had our potatoes, our sweet potatoes, our squashes, and on it went, and it was basically almost free for us to have on our table. Because all the excess was 3/4 to almost 75 to 78% of it was going to the community for sale. So you got to think, why not? If you got the health and you got the strength, I don't care what your age is, and you've got the ability, why not? You know the greatest thing that I learned with the homestead? We met more people selling our produce until I had the University of Tennessee coming out to our farm asking me to teach them how to do it. I used to lecture at the University of Tennessee on what we were doing because they were blown away. They were bringing their students out there. They had never seen a homestead. They said, Ron, I had inspectors coming out there that were secretly coming to the farm trying to trip me up. And they said, man, you are above and beyond. I said, because I believe in order. The thing that they freaked out on is, man, this is the most beautiful piece of farm I've ever seen. And I took pride in my farm. That farm doesn't have a weed in it. And you can see it, and there's no Roundup on this farm. Now I got to get off my braggadocio. But I put a lot of pride into the work. I want our farms, when people walk onto your homestead, they're going like, wow. I know what you think when you look at those pictures. Because I see the same thing. But the amount of food that's being produced there is mind-staggering. You're looking at beds. Those are 36-inch beds cut right down, each one of those. The ground was so amazing, you could sink your hand into it that deep. Just by pushing your hand into it. We've had people just freaking out. How in the world have you done this? And that's what I did. I spent most of my lecturing years in educating people on organic produce farming. What did I do? Okay. Those are 36-inch beds. Those 36-inch beds go all the way across this field. Now I'm going to tell you something. Those beds are producing enough foot. Each one of those are 200-foot rows. From down here to down there. And there's 2 rows, at least what you're seeing of these. There's 2 rows in each one of these beds. These are the brassica families. There are various different greens and radishes and all these things, and then lettuce and on it goes. But every foot, every 12 inches, there's a plant. How many plants is in one row? 200-foot row, there's 400 plants in a bed. An average broccoli, one broccoli head, not counting the broccoli buds you cut off that broccoli, one broccoli head went and sold every time we cut a broccoli head for $4. And get your head wrapped around what we're talking about. We're talking about organic produce. We're not talking about chemical grown junk. When people ate this food, it melted in their mouth and it blew their mind. I had people saying, what in the world have you done to this food? How come it just slaps you in the face? I had kids coming out here begging me for carrots. Where's the candy? No, they came out asking for carrots. Because they would bite into these carrots and it would absolutely blow their minds. The parents were saying, what in the world? Our kids don't like carrots. I said, of course not. You feed them that garbage Walmart carrot and you're going to get what you eat. So, just on the homestead alone, folks, if you learn the art of growing food, it's very, very important. If you want a really good book that will give you a lot of good guidelines, get Elliot Coleman. Look him up online. Elliot Coleman is one of the gurus in America of growing lots of food on little land. Okay? What? Well, we're not getting there yet. We'll get there. And the book, Elliot Coleman, he's got, I think there's 4 books that he's written, and all of them are great. But he's got a Master Gardener's book on organic gardening. It's a super, super nice book. Easy to understand. I like the way he writes. But what he's taught, and it's revolutionized the growing ability on small land, is how much food you can put. There's no way on planet Earth you can eat what's just right there. You do know that, right? There it is in its all of its glory. Now, I don't know if I can enlarge it or not. Okay. There's kale, there's cabbage, there's broccoli, there's different types of kale, there's different colors of cabbages. On up this field that way, there's a full 200-foot bed of carrots that got that long, and nice, big, beautiful carrots. Everything you want to grow, you can grow. And what you do is you have those 36-inch beds, and my carrots in those 36-inch beds, I had 4 rows in a bed. I was getting $4 a pound for carrots.
So probably when you started, you are, getting your own seeds from your crop. But where would you get seeds now? Because it's Monsanto who's taking all of our good seeds.
Well, I mean, there are companies that are not Monsanto bought out. Johnny Selected Seed is probably one of the best ones in this country. A whole bunch of old hippies that had this vision in their heart and mind and are still following, and I'm thankful for that. Because that's where I get Johnny Selected Seeds. And there's other companies that are popping up now because of the concern of what's going on with Monsanto and all this business. But, like I said, I'm going to wear you all out on this subject because this is a subject I really like to talk about, is food production. Now, I'm just giving you a foretaste, and then we'll try to talk about how in the world they get like that. We have a big composting area, but each one of these beds, you would not believe, we had a company not far away that it was called Monterey Mushroom. We use the Monterey mushroom dirt, or compost dirt they call it. I don't know if they have it out here or not, or whether you can even get it. But I used to buy a dump truck, and a dump truck is 22 yards. I don't know if you can comprehend how big that is and how much that is. That would fill up that whole platform right there, about that deep. 22 dump trucks. And I'm going to tell you, every year, and I spread every last one of them by hand. In every one of those 22, or those beds that you see there, that were 200 foot long, I did that year after year by hand. It was all done. I tell you, I'm not bragging, I'm just telling you, I was a force to be contended with. And everybody knew that. But Ron got old and wore himself out. And I found a company up in Pennsylvania that was a company that built manure spreaders. And I called him and talked with the owner. And he said, "Man, how much compost do you spread by hand?" I said, "Well, truckloads, dump truck, 22 yards, and you're doing that by hand?" He said, "You are nuts." I said, "Yeah, but I like it." He said, "Look, I got a machine that you need." He said, "And I'm going to send you pictures of it on the computer. You look it over. I'll ship it to you for free because of who you are." And that thing spreads it all for me now. It goes perfectly right behind my little old Farmall. I got a 48 Farmall tractor that's made for produce production. When I left my horses, I went to that little old 48 model Farmall tractor, little 100, and it goes perfectly. And I can drive that tractor right over, and the wheels make the 36-inch bed, and the spreader spreads it right on top of that bed. I used to do that all by a shovel. and a wheelbarrow. And now Ron got lazy. So, I'm just showing you these pictures, and it is a little braggadocious, but I'm sorry. No, I'm not. I am thankful that I learned the art of growing a lot of food in a lot of small space. That very one bed, there's like 40-something beds in that field, 200 foot long. Now, I split those beds up in 50-foot units. And we're not talking about organic gardening here. We're just talking about food production, but it's hard for me not to go. But one of those beds can grow enough potatoes for you folks. 2 rows in one of those beds would produce you enough potatoes alone. 2 of those beds would raise so much potatoes you wouldn't know what to do with. And they come up out of that ground like wahoo. You almost want to eat it like an apple. I'm not kidding you. If you come walking on the farm and you saw what we were doing, it did exactly what the University of Tennessee did and brought their students out there. That soil was doing amazing things. And a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. Oh my goodness, did we have to improve the soil. I wore out both wrists. I can't do push-ups anymore because I can't get down on my wrists without feeling like I'm falling apart. And I love to do push-ups, but I ruined my wrist by hoeing. I have done enough hoeing in those beds right there. You don't see a weed one. And it's because I had special built hoes that I used, that I was there day and night when I wasn't doing harvesting. I worked and I worked and I worked and I worked more. 5 years of keeping your fields clean is 15 to 20 years ahead of you of less work. Every year after 5 years, it's better and better and better until you don't have weed control problems anymore like you did when you started. When we started our carrot beds, my wife and I would have to be out there hoeing those things with a kitchen fork. Now, I'm laying this stuff on you because if you think about going to homesteading, you better start thinking differently. You're not going to go out there and say, oh, I got a piece of ground and I'm going to have a garden and it's just going to be so nice. It ain't so nice, honey. Let me tell you. It's a lot of work. And every year we took those kitchen forks out there to where we were getting carrots like this and beautiful and smack you in the face when you eat them. You could eat the greens off of these carrots. They were that good. But it took a lot of backbone and sweat. And you got to think. Now remember, $3 to $4 a pound? Why not sell 75 to 80% of that bed of carrots? Man, you ain't going to eat that many carrots. But seed's cheap, takes a lot of labor, and you can create a market. And the neat thing of it is you meet people where you build community. Yeah, when they see this, they say, Ron, can I come to your farm? No. I don't have time to chat. You want to come to the farm? You're getting a hoe in your hand. Yes. Now you can see it right down the row. Every one of those drip lines were all put in there by myself. After I get my plants in place, you know, I don't know what it's like totally out. Yes, I do, because I grew up here. If you don't have irrigation, you're in big trouble. I had people come to me and said, Ron, don't you think it's a lack of faith that you're putting irrigation in here? I said, no, I think it's presumption and stupid if you don't. I said, because if the weather shuts off and you get a drought, then you lose your production. And so I dropped every one of these rows had a drip tape in it. And I get drip tape, and it's 7,800 running feet in a roll. And I used a lot of it, to drip irrigate. And on top of that, which is another little secret I'm giving you guys, is I had what's called an injector system that I injected fish and kelp into the soil to the plants. And those plants were like, oh yeah, honey, this is wonderful. And they would just grow, and they would get stronger. Because all the organic food, once you got a root base that was building out like this, it would start grabbing the food that you're putting. I'm not supposed to be going down this road, but I can't help it. There is a whole community in that soil with organic built soil. And when you feed that organic community feeds you. I had a watering system, yes, and you have to have a pond and a filtering system that will filter out all the sediment out of your drip line because you don't want your drips plugging up. So there's a lot of different ways that all can be done. I've got friends that do it the same way, and they use an irrigation pumping system. It's gas powered, and I don't mind using gas as long as we have it. When we get to having to homestead and everything gets crazy, you're not going to have to worry about, a big production level like this, but you're going to have the ground ready for your food production, all right? So irrigation is important, and every one of those lines have a drip tape in it to make sure that you're getting water or, substance to your soil. Now, believe me, I want to talk so bad about soil fertility, it's not funny. But it is very, 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 very important. You are what you eat. And there is no lying about that. When God, through Christ Jesus, His Son, created us, what did He create you of? Dirt. So don't get so proud. You're just a bunch of dirt. The book says, from dirt you came, so dirt you will return. Is that right? Now, the better your dirt is, the better your dirt is. And I don't know how to tell you that, but to tell you that. The more you feed that soil, the soil will feed you because you are what the soil is. Your energy will be in your soil, and the better your soil gets, the less your bug problem is. You would not believe, these people walked on the farm, and I thought people that said this stuff were a bunch of kooks. Because they were eating everything up. But my soil wasn't right up to par what it should have been. And they still we raised bugs for the world back there in Tennessee and Kentucky. So if you want to come back and homestead and enjoy the bugs, come. But the stronger and the healthier those plants get, kelp. You've heard of liquid kelp, right? You know what liquid kelp is? Huh? It's an algae. But you know what algae is? If you take an analogy of kelp or any of those seaweeds, it will blow your mind what's in that plant. All of the minerals of our land has landed up in the ocean. And all those minerals have gone into kelp and seaweeds. And it's those kelps. People ask me, Ron, how in the world do you get this stuff to taste like food? I use kelp. There's another little secret. And kelp If you want an immune system, you don't want to be getting sick all the time, don't go get dadgum vaccine. Yes. It's disgusting. Oh, brother, I love you. I'm going to tell you something, folks. You put that soil back to life and you put the goodies back into that ground and you will eat food you've never eaten before. This joke of organic produce is a joke. It is a joke. When they got in bed with the FDA and the AMA and all the rest of it, they lost the vision of growing food properly. It's better than the chemical, but not a whole lot. Now, food production. Oops, keep going the wrong way. Now, where we're at right now, we're just now in the process of rebuilding a homestead and rebuilding the soil and all the goodies that go with it. But that home you saw, the single-story one, is sitting right here. It looks right over this. And that's every homestead, I don't care where you live, needs to have a high tunnel, or what some of you think is what's called a greenhouse. Now, in that picture right there, you see over there, those were commercial-size high tunnels. Those were 100-footers by, some were 25 foot wide, and my biggest ones were 32 feet wide. All right? And they were full of food, and we're going to see some of that. But what you can do inside a high tunnel on your homestead is you can grow food through the winter in there that you can get your fresh veggies out of it. We're still eating carrots and beets and greens right now that we planted in late fall in our high tunnel. You know, not everybody has California climate. You hear me? Oh, brother, I can go in there and no, I better not talk that way. I can go down there and strip down naked if I wanted to in the wintertime and work in there. And I don't do that, but you can. You can walk in there and you wouldn't believe how nice it is. It's just solar controlled. The heat is collected in there, and food will amazingly grow all winter long. It's a 6 mil plastic. It's a greenhouse plastic, and it will last you 8 to 10 years. 6 to 8 mil, yeah. Not too thick? Yeah, you can get it. I don't use it because I don't like it's just too thick. It's really hard to work with, and I'm not real sure you get that much greater. You know, what it does is it cuts down on a lot of sunlight shortly thereof, and you can't afford to have that being done. Now, talking about high tunnels, I'm just trying to push myself because, what's that? Not in these, well, 3 of these, I had 4 of these, all right? 3 of them were nothing but what we called high tunnels that are nothing but a greenhouse without a heating system in it. Well, no. Yes. It depends on what you're growing in the winter. I mean, if you want tomatoes in the winter, you can do it, but you have to pay the price in staying up all night, keeping a fire going to keep your greenhouse going, okay? I don't raise tomatoes in the winter months. I don't like doing that. I like to get some sleep. But what I do raise in there is I can raise all the greens, all the carrots, all the beets. I can raise all kinds of root crops in there, and I can be eating all the vegetables. I told my wife just the other day, I said, Chris, this is amazing. But every time I go down here, I get to go to my own Walmart, and I get to get all the fresh veggies I want. I can pick what we want, and we can eat what we want, and we can do. We just had a great big meal before I got on the plane, and it was all right out of the garden. This picture here, you see that line of that tree right there? Our home is sitting right there. Now, I'm just trying to show you what you can do. And what you can do is you can make a good living at this if you need to make a good living on your homestead. Even if you don't need it, I still suggest doing it. Now, let's look a little bit further here. Oops, wrong way again. All right. Now, I'm going to come back to that. There you are. That's in one of those big high tunnels. All right, you're not seeing but one row in here. Those tomatoes got up to 10 feet tall. I was producing, you would not believe the amount of tomatoes. Right here, you see me standing here. Right there, those were bell peppers right against this wall right here. Over here was another section of tomatoes, and over here was another section of cucumbers. And over here on this wall was another section of bell peppers. That was one house. 100-foot house. And I'm not kidding you, folks. It would blow your mind what was coming out of that one house. I had UT come out there just for that alone. It was a 30 by 100. All right? And it was more commercial. Now, you don't need to have that. Now, and I showed you this picture earlier here. Right there, that's a 40 by 20. That's the size you want for your simple homestead. If you don't want to have, it's a 40-foot by 20. If you want a homestead and you want some production to be able to sell and to create a market, then you need a larger one. I'm done with that. I'm done with commercial growing. I am done with it. I've worked it for years. It's done good for us. But I said I want to live the rest of my life doing what we've always wanted to do, and that's just kind of relax and enjoy it. I lost, confession, I lost the love of growing food because of the amount of food we were producing. You all have no idea unless you've been there. It was slavery to the first degree. And I was my own master of my own slavery. Get that one wrapped around your head. I willingly put myself out there as a slave, and I built my own situation. And the biggest problem is I couldn't find anybody who wanted to work. Nobody wanted to work. And so Ron was nothing but a workhorse. And everybody knew that because I would work from sunup to sundown, and I lived in these high tunnels in those fields, keeping them clean and producing food as you saw out there. So when you talk about homesteading to me, I told you I get crazy in my head because y'all don't know what I'm talking about. But now you're seeing a little bit. I'm not talking about a homestead to go out there to survive. I'm talking about a homestead because it's your life. All right. Those are figs off of our present farm. Yes. And berries, raspberries. Right there. This side of that high tunnel you see right there, right over there, believe it or not, right there is our garden. I told my wife, I said, Chris, I'm having a hard time doing this. I'm used to doing acres. But right over on this side of the high tunnel, there's grapes, raspberries, asparagus on both ends here. And this is just a small patch. Years ago, I had 200-foot rows of raspberries and 200-foot rows of blackberries. All right? And we were all hand-picking these things. And they went out every week when they were in production to our CSA members, and they were getting all this fruit, and they were so thankful for it, and I hated every minute of it. Because it's a lot of work. I cannot stress that enough. I want you to leave the city, but you better prepare your mind for where we're going. It's not a game. It is reality. It is a tough decision to make. But I'm going to tell you something. I will do this again if I had another life to live. I would not change it. I am thankful for everything it's been to me. Excuse me? Yeah, I'm young yet, 70 years old. That's young enough. But anyways, yes, I do. I have what's called a BCS tiller. It's the best tiller in the world. BCS, it's an Italian rototiller, and the tiller is actually 32 inches wide. It's a walk-behind tractor. It's not a rototiller. It is a tractor. It's a walk-behind tractor. It's all hydro-geared. It's no chains. It's nothing. It is a machine. No, it runs by gas. It's a big, nice Honda motor. But this thing is amazing. Those beds you saw up there in those pictures, I could take that rototiller after I got all my goodies in the bed, and I could run one swath down there, and one swath back, and it was ready. And the nice thing with this BCS tiller, y'all get me sidetracked. This BCS tiller, literally, you take the handles and it turns over here like this so you can walk in the walk path and not in your bed. Most of your rototillers, you have to walk in your bed or strain your back out of place trying to keep it under control. The BCS tiller was made for what we are doing in produce production. And those beds, as you saw in those pictures, the beds were like 32 to 36 inches wide, and the walk was 20 inches wide, and you saw that in that production. That's just wide enough to get a wheelbarrow down there to harvest your goods. 20-inch walk path with a 36-inch bed, and you'll produce more food. You use this technique, brethren, in a garden, just a smaller garden, and it will blow your mind the amount of food you can grow on a plot that's just that size right there. You can produce more food than you can. This has revolutionized homesteading to a higher degree that our old pioneers knew nothing about. You know where this concept came from? It came out of Europe. And it came out of France. Elliot Coleman mastered this technique, and he went to Europe and was paid by some folks to go to Europe and find out how these people are doing it on small lands and the amount of food they're producing. And he went to France, and he came back, and he started this up over 40 years ago. And he is the guru of organic produce production on small lands. He will tell you, all you need is 5 acres. He runs a 5-acre farm, and he's making over $150,000 on that little piece of land. Get your head wrapped around some of that. We're not looking for money, but if you're going to be out there on a homestead, use it while you can. Okay, somebody raised their hand somewhere. Yep. Well, y'all just can't stand me not getting into organic food production. Yeah. The question was, do we do any rotation? We do a lot of things. And like I said, how long do y'all want to be here tonight?
1 a.m.
No. I'm not staying up to 1 like I did last night.
You can sit.
I refuse. But we'll talk a little bit about that. There's a whole art. Literally, I could come back here and we could go through another workshop seminar on just food production. I'm just stimulating your brains, folks. That's all I'm doing this time around. I'm willing to come back, maybe. To help you to get on your feet if need be. My life is yours, and I want you to know that, and I mean that. I know what's coming, and it frightens my heart for people because they have no idea. They don't even know how to grow a garden hardly, much less enough to survive what's coming. And that's why I'm sharing. I'm not trying to brag to y'all, but I am, and I can't help it. God has been good to me, and He's taught me wondrous things. You can see it. I mean, you can see it.
What is your pollinator situation here? Do you keep bees, or is it?
I don't need to keep bees personally because we have wild bees, and they do all the work for me. I don't like working bees anymore. I used to work bees, but these domestic bees have become so raped that they're no longer... They're difficult, as this brother back here knows. They're difficult to keep alive without a lot of chemicals. There are ways of doing it, and I frankly have never had a real problem with it because I am not in a chemical environment. God has done wondrous things if we would just learn to live with nature as they're supposed to be. Wild bees that are little bitty fellas about the size of my little fingernail that live somewhere out there in the great wilds, and I roll my curtains up on my high tunnels, and these little boogers come in there and they pollinate all my tomatoes and all my cucumbers, and they go in there working. They're in there all day long, and they don't bite me, they don't sting me. I can go in there and work, and they're swinging around my head and flying around, and they're doing their job. And they are doing what needs to be done, but you've got to work with them as they will work with you. I believe that's the way the Creator made it to be. And I've just tried to follow some of those guidelines. So, bee production in our area we're living in an agriculture community, so there's commercial, all that stuff that's going on over here behind us and way over there and all over the place. It can't get away from that. So you're dealing with, things. So when you're looking for land, you're trying to look for land where you have some kind of protection and environment. And that's what we kind of have done. So now, aphids. You know what causes aphids? Too much nitrogen. Most farmers that are trying to grow a garden, they use way too much nitrogen. And that's from either too much manure that is too fresh and not composted. I don't use fresh manure. It is composted for at least a year's period of season. All right? It's really broken down. And that's a whole nother discussion, a whole nother lecture just on compost alone, so I'm not going to go there. Like I said, you want me to come back? We'll come back and we'll do a workshop on organic production, all right? But we're only here talking about the 3 essentials of homesteading. What are they? Shelter, water, and food production. Now you're seeing food production. Now, in these structures on a homestead, this sister over here asked me a question yesterday about harvesting grains. Did I not hear her ask me that? I want to address that. There is a lot of stuff to cover, and we're not going to make it. So we'll just have to do it another time. I don't mind that. That sounded all right. At least it was. So, right now as it stands, you can get organic pesticides, all right? And I use one, it's called Conserve. And it comes from a plant derived, and this pesticide will kill you as fast as anything. It's not a toy. It's not to be messed with. But it is water soluble, and it's not like the chemical pesticides that it penetrates the cellular structure of the plant because of its binding materials. And when you eat it, you're eating these pesticides. The pesticide I use when I need to use it, what it does is it will dissolve just by the morning dew. And as the morning dew, 2 or 3 days happens, it's all washed off and it's gone and dissolved, and it's gone. It's not even in the soil anymore. But it's a plant-derived pesticide, and you can get it online. It's called Conserve. Yeah, it's the name. It's on. You can get it through Amazon, I believe, and the name of the bottle of the product is called Conserve. All right? It's like a tablespoon per gallon. This stuff is stout. And a bottle that it's about a quart, it'll last you about 5 to 6 years. You don't use a lot of it, but it does the job. It will deal with any bugs you're dealing with, is what I'm trying to say. So, what's that? It works for any food production. Yes. Anyway, that's our place right now, and you can see the size of those tomatoes right there. And the peppers were the exact same way, and we treated the soil. And this soil was the most sickest soil I've ever bought in my entire life. I was ashamed to call it my farm, and I still am. But we're working with it, and we're building it, and hopefully within, if time lasts, a few years, it'll be like that place you saw over there, but on a smaller scale, which is okay with me, because I have another 1 acre garden you all don't see on this picture that's somewhere else on the farm that we produce all of our big stuff like potatoes and squash and sweet potatoes and all those goodies, and even field corn to where we use for cornmeal and all that stuff. You just don't see it up here. I don't thus far have that problem because my orchard's brand spanking new. And there are companies that actually specialize in orchards. I'm not an orchardist. I can grow them, but I am not a specialist, and I won't tell you I am. But there are companies you can get online, and it's all organically done. In fact, I have a book at home on organic orcharding, and it deals with all this stuff. And we'll just have to, I didn't think about bringing all the addresses and all that here, so it's just dealing with a whole nother food production level. $15 years? Yeah. Yeah, it's a blight. It's a blighted condition that creates. Fire. Back our way, it's caused because of cedar trees. Cedar trees carries that fire blight, and it's passed on through the air. Yes, they do. Okay. Right there you see our garlic. Write a book. A weekly Zoom? Oh, I love you too. No, you can communicate with us through the computer. It's Urban Plow, Herb, H-E-R-B, and Plow @gmail.com. And you can communicate with my wife. She's Chris, because I don't even know how to turn a computer on, so I don't want to know how to learn a computer, so I refuse. Chris, C-H-R-I-S. Chris and Ron. Herb, H-E-R-B, and Plow, P-L-O-W, @gmail.com. And you can communicate with us on that. And I'll give you, no, I won't. No, I won't. I'm not going to give you my telephone number because I don't want to answer the telephone. Hey, I walked away from that, and I'm not going to put back into it. I'm just telling you the honest truth now. You're good to have me out here. I was done, until some people got a hold of me and said, Ron, we really do need you to come out here and talk to us. I says, are you sure? And I'm thankful for the opportunity, and I mean that. But when you're living on a homestead, folks, your brain has got to be thinking about every moment of your life, of what you're doing there and what's going on. So, anyways, there's a lot more. Like I said, that's a tomato production. Each one of those plants were producing about 45 pounds of tomatoes per plant. And each one of those tomatoes, there was a 100-foot building, or a 100-foot greenhouse here. There was 4 rows. There was 2 rows in a bed. You can't see the other row, but they were standing in this one row, 36-inch bed, and these tomatoes were standing like this on strings, and they were standing up like this, and they were 10 feet tall. They're big beef. And these tomatoes just about pulled my greenhouse to the ground. The production was so amazing that I had to really think about. In fact, I'll tell you the honest truth, it did destroy one of my greenhouses because it weakened it so much, because the food production was so amazing that once we got through the season, the winter came and snow and ice happened and it collapsed it. Boom. So, when we talk about a greenhouse production, I want to explain something to y'all here. See that greenhouse there? That's a little style of the bigger styles I had. That's called a Gothic style. So if you're looking for greenhouse, you look for Gothic style. A Gothic style comes up and it comes to a peak like this at a crest, like a gable end of a house. And it will carry snow, it will carry any kind of weight you can put on these things. But if you go with a regular Quonset style, which is the one I had before I got my big new one, it was just a Quonset. It was just like a dome like this. And those things get to the point where they come to almost a flat up here at the top, and they will collapse on you. Pay a little extra for the Gothic style, and you'll be really, really, really happy with it. Because you cannot put too much weight on these things. The more weight, the stronger they become, because they're built to take that. That's what they're made for. This is 40 by 20. This is just a nice small one. It's what I recommend for every, homestead for yourself. Now, if you're going to go into food production, if you have a heart to do it, then I would recommend at least a 96 to 100 foot by 20 or 30. And I'm going to tell you something, what you can produce in there, you wouldn't. I had 4 of these. We had eggplant in one of them. We had Japanese eggplant. You know what they're like, right? They're skinny and they're long and they're usually kind of a burgundy color. We had eggplants 7 to 8 feet tall. I am not lying to you. Believe me. I had to have a stepping stool to harvest eggplant. The eggplant, I don't know how much it was, but it was too much. I built soil up, and like I said, I'm not talking about organic production here. I'm just trying to show you the importance of what you can do on a homestead and making that homestead a functioning homestead to be financially feasible while you're on the homestead. Before the time comes, it's going to crash. And when it crashes, your homestead is there ready to produce food for you. I hope you get that idea. It's a plastic. It's a greenhouse plastic. It's not a normal plastic. When you order a high tunnel and you go through a company, which we have one back there, but it won't do you any good out here. They have them here too. You just have to tell them you want the plastic with it, and they will provide you with the plastic for that greenhouse production. Now, on those high tunnels, when I come back, if I come back, we will work through high tunnel production, all right? We will deal with organic gardening. We will deal with that idea up there, and we will work with another workshop with you folks on how to do it. I'm not here to tell you how to do it. I'm just trying to encourage you to tell you what you can do. Everyone else can do this. I don't care. I'm still doing this. I've scaled back because I'm done with the commercial life. Maybe. I got people asking me to start going up to the farmer's market. My lady that cuts my hair, she says, "Ron, are you going to raise some more cantaloupe and watermelon?" She says, "Man, they were the best cantaloupe and watermelon I've ever eaten in my life." How in the world? I was just up there before I came out to get a haircut because it was getting kind of raggy looking. And there was another farmer in there, and she was bragging on what I did last year. And I just told him, I said, "Look," I said, and then he said he was in charge of the farmer's market. And he said, "Man," he said, "you need to come to the market." I said, "Don't go there with me." I said, "Man, I am done." He said, "No, you can't be, not with what you know." I said, "I am done. I'm tired. Believe me, I cannot tell you how tired this boy is." The what? Tower garden? I don't know a whole lot about it. Is it, what is it? I don't, is it hydroponics? Is it done with water? Okay. Okay, now I know what you're talking about. I thought that's what you were talking. I wasn't real sure. You want my opinion? I don't want to give it to you. I don't know where you're coming from, and I don't want to offend you, and I really don't know who you are, but I'm going to tell you straight where I believe in it. God put the plants in the soil. God put the plants in the soil in the Garden of Eden, and it's good enough for me. And that's where I stay. I don't care what all these people talk about. And I know the soil is where God put it. And I know that's what I was built of. It was not hydroponic. I was not a fish. If you got a backyard, plow it up. Get rid of your stupid shrubberies that's producing no food and put shrubberies in there like blueberries and raspberries and grapes and plants that's going to produce you food. You can do it I know people. I knew a guy in Canada that was just a ordinary guy that got into organic growing. And what he did is he went to his neighbors and he said, look, he said, would you let me use your yard to grow food? They said yes. The guy's making almost $200,000 a year. Just in yards. You know, believe me, I do not have the ability right now to go into a lot of things. But there is a wide field of microgreens. There is a field of sprouting. There is a whole wide world out there for people right now that can make a good living. And if they don't want to, they can still do it. It's there. Yes, you can grow a lot of food in a little space. Okay. I don't know how long we're supposed to go. Anyways, that's our garlic. It's drying. Well, it's just got hung up. So I mean, it's in full development. I have to pull it out younger and let it in the barn. Now, that was my potato patch. And that's a younger potato patch. Those are 200-foot rows, and that was enough potatoes grown there. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows. There are potatoes right there. And that was enough potatoes to fill that CSA. You cannot believe the amount of potatoes that come out of that ground. I was pulling about 500 to 600 pounds out of each row. Yeah. All right? I'm just telling you. What you can do on a piece of land to grow food is phenomenal. It is really amazing. What's that? Yes. 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 Like I said, we're not here to talk about organic produce production. I'm just stimulating your mind. When we come back, if we have time, what we will do is I will give you all the secrets that y'all have got stimulated in your head now over. It's taken me a lifetime to get here. All right? And it's working, as you can see. This is no joke. I'm not just doing this to just play with your heads. When we talk about homesteading, I think differently. I think of what I can do, what I can produce, and how much can I produce, and how you cannot believe if you just take one row there, and let's say you just got 400 pounds off of that row. Do you know what organic potatoes are selling for right now? Everybody. Let's say an average of $5 a pound. $4 to $5 a pound for good organic potatoes. You take that and you multiply it 400 times. Per row. Now get your head wrapped around it a little bit. It works. I've done it, and I've been there. It's wore my life out, but it is there. And when you create a market, and what we will do when we come back, we will talk about marketing. We will work through some of these things to where you can build a market and make the homestead successful. I don't want you to go out there to the homestead and be a failure. I don't want to have in my conscience that guilt in my heart that you were not prepared to go out there and do it and stay. I don't know. Oh, very good. Did you hear what he's asked? Is there any difference between tomato production in a greenhouse versus on the outside? I can't answer that for out here in California altogether, but I can tell you my experience. I don't use one pesticide, one herbicide, one fungicide, one anycide, blighticide, or nothing inside these houses, but good organic food in the soil. All right? I don't have zero sprays on these. I don't have to deal with blights or anything because I inject with my injector system a high amount of calcium and fish. And when you keep that production up, this is supposed to be done in that other lecture, you know. It keeps the hormones and the immune system of that plant all the way to its top peak. And it will produce food like blows your mind. You cannot believe, you're only seeing a wee bit up there. What come out of that house year after year after year of amazing amount of food, and those plants never blighted and got sick. They were healthy and strong. On my soil? No. Not on mine they didn't. But I know. I just tell you a whole story about that whole thing, and I don't want to go down there because it'd bore you to death. But when the proof was in the pudding for me, and I was satisfied with that, when I had students eating or biting into a tomato, and they were floored. They were floored. I had the teachers come out there and taste this food, and they couldn't believe it. What in the world are you doing? I pioneered the organic produce production in Tennessee. They come to me and ask me, and I'm not bragging, but because of my experience in years of producing food that they saw happening, they came to me and asked me to run a food bank that the state was going to control, and I said no. You will not control me, and you will not take my farm over, and you will not do this to me. You can forget it. That's what the state of Tennessee University did to me, and I told him to get off my farm and don't come back. I'm thankful. I am thankful. I have got a lot to be thankful for, and thank you. But I want to encourage all of you people. I've grown to love every one of you. I watch your faces, and you light my heart up. We need to do something, folks. I will covet myself to you. I mean that. If I can help you to get out of here, I will do that. I mean that. It's wore my spirit out, friends. I mean it. What's going on right now in this country? I never thought I would see the day that we would be in the condition we are right now. And I'm going to tell you something, folks. I don't like what's coming. It's going to get worse. I said this earlier in closing. I hope you're all believers in here, and I hope you're all Christians. I don't know where you're coming from, but I say this because I love you all, and I mean that. This thing is going to swing to the far right, and we're going to see what the book of Revelation chapter 13 says about forcing you to worship the beast. We've got a president, and I believe Trump is going to become that president that is saying things that puts the fear in my legs. He's saying to the churches now, I will give you more power than you've ever had. You know what he's saying? If the book of Revelation is correct, and I was not meant to do this, but I'm sorry. But the book of Revelation states very clearly that the United States would make an image to that beast system, and when you study this thing out, it means that they will bind church and state together, where the church will control the state and the state will control you. And they will dictate to you when you can and when you can't, or whether you will or whether you will not. And if we are not built on the rock, Jesus Christ, brethren, we will not stand. He has got to be our lover. He has to be, brethren. Not some church, not some denomination, but Jesus and Jesus alone. Thank God for brethren that have an organized body of believers. But they're not going to save you. They can help you along your way, and thank God for that. But you've got to have a relationship with Jesus, friends, more than you've ever had it. And if there ever was a time that you get on your knees and you search your journey, it is now. I'm telling you, friends, I'm not saying this to preach at you, but things are hitting right in our face. I have talked this, and I've never lived until now to see what's happening is astounding. You hear politicians talking Jesus. We've never heard that in our... Have you ever heard that in your lifetime? I'm going to tell you something, folks. It all sounds good to the ear, but it is not good where it's going. Some of these folks came from the old country, and they know what communism did. But communism was nothing to what the Roman Catholic Church did in Europe. And what the Roman Catholic Church did in Europe, I've got some good friends that are Roman Catholics. I married a Roman Catholic woman that became a true believer in Christ. But that system is the death of the European people. And this country is right down its track right now. And I'm going to tell you something. We need to be serious about what we're doing, and we need to be serious about working together, and we need to be serious about doing something about it. Get on the land and start living the life that the Lord wants you to live. Whatever you've got to do to sacrifice to get there, do it. Do it. The dividends are they're just great. Oh, brother, it's in heavenly places, brother. So, you can see I can get real wound up on that story, but it's so real to me that when I see faces like this, I see things that you may not see, and it fills my heart up, and I can't help but say, get out of here. Yes. Now, I'm going to finish. There was a question, somebody. Okay, here and here, and then I'll get to your question.
I just wanted, I don't think I got the grain part. Would you say more about grains?
Grains? Yes, that's what her question was.
I was going to ask if you considered any other states good for homesteading. How about like Idaho?
Yes, absolutely yes. Now, Texas has some good areas, absolutely. There's a lot more, literally in parts of Texas. I've got a cousin that lives in Texas, and there are parts of Texas that is a good area. Just look and watch and stay away from the New Age corners.
But also Texas is going to be heavily hit with the 20-year drought, like California and Texas.
Well, you can deal with drought. You have a homestead, you got water, you can still grow food. What you're looking for is you're looking for a piece of land that you can live on. And you just have to look in the states that don't have so much choking restrictions. And this West Coast states are some of the worst in the union right now, and it's getting worse as we stand here. There are states within the union, and I happen to live in one of them. I believe is one of the best states in the union are those states within that boundary. All right? It's a Bible belt, and I'm okay with that because being in Jesus, I don't have to worry about a lot of things, and it's going to come no matter where we are because the whole world, it says, is going to wander after the beast. You don't want to get me started on that again because I will end up, anyways, going down that road. I don't right now because we have what we call dry land fish on our farm, and it's mushrooms. They're edible mushrooms that grow wild through our woods, all right? Now, I used to raise mushrooms. And various shiitakes is the main one we raised at the time. And we did it in wood logs. And it was a really neat production. But, I grew to the place where I couldn't keep up with it all. But yes, mushrooms are a tremendous, it's a good cash crop, actually. And it's a great cash crop, but it's also, a nice homestead food for those that like mushrooms. Oh, okay, now, hush up, and let me not get sidetracked. Grain.
Yes, she asked yesterday, how do you water the grain to take them from the machine?
Well, I've done it a number of ways. And I'm not doing it right now because I'm getting a little bit... Huh? Yes. Yes. If you go in the Bible, there is that study about Gideon. But in spite of that, I have what's called a handsaw. You know what a handsaw is? It's a little sickle. And the Bible talks about when the fruit is ready for harvest, they throw in the sickle. Okay? It's a razor sharp sickle that you use to cut the grain, and you lay it down and you cut the grain. Okay, you know all that. And then, okay, I'm getting there, please. And then you put, you may know this, but there's other people in this room don't know this. So then you got to take it and then you got to shock it and tie it in their bundles. And you use 4 to 6 bundles in a shock. And then you put a cap on it, one of those bundles, to keep it from ruining the grain underneath. Okay? That is coming. I'm right back in the process of doing just that very thing because I've got a plot that already has got wheat growing in it ready for this this process, all right? Then once you get your grain and it's cut and it's harvested and it's drying in the field, you don't cut grain. Now don't forget this, people. If you get into grain production and you're cutting your grain because you're going to have to somehow grow your grain to have pancakes or bread or whatever, when you go to look at the grain, there's one thing I learned, and I didn't learn this from just anybody. I was studying my Bible, and I couldn't figure out why the farmers would go into the field looking for the first fruits. Now, what in the world did that mean? When I went to studying, I began to realize the first fruits meant the farmer would go into the field and he'd walk through his sections of field and he would take the grain of wheat or barley and he would peel it back and he would get a grain and he would pinch it. He wanted to see whether it was in the melt dough stage, predominantly dough and not melt, because if you cut that grain when it's too dry, it will shatter and go all over the ground. The other thing they found out in the grain production of it is that when they cut it in its proper melt dough stage, the protein level of that grain was at its all-high time, and the gluten content was gone in it, and there was no problems of digesting wheat. It was predominantly in its sugar stage as a pre-digested grain that was like as if you sprouted it. And it was 100% usable as food. I grew our own grain on our homestead for years and did it just that way, and we never bought one bag of wheat. Yeah. And that grain, when you ate that loaf of bread, girl, it just melted in your mouth. The flavor of that wheat was unbelievable. You know all this griping and belly aching about gluten intolerance? Well, you know what gluten intolerance is caused by? By the GMO nonsense that's going on, by the chemical Roundup that's going on, and because of the improper harvesting of that grain. Those combines wait for that grain to be golden. So when they go in there and they cut it, it falls back into the combine, and that's it. It's shaken out right then and there. And it has ruined the reputation of wheat. It just has ruined it. And I'm going to tell you something. It's one of the greatest grains that we have for many, many different things. What's that? Yeah. Then once you get it out of your shock, or your shock's grown, you take it into a room and you have what's called a thrashing floor. I built a thrashing box that stood so high with a floor in it that was made of dowels, and there was like just barely a section to where the grain could fall through. And I'd put the grain shock in there, and I'd take my big old stick and I go, and when I got angry, that's where I'd go beat things. And I beat that stuff to a pulp. And all the grain would fall into this great big tin underneath the box. And there it was, all the wheat in this nice container underneath this beating box, is what I used to call it, a thrashing box. And then, if you don't have what I have, I've got a cleaner that is like a winnower that you pour the grain into the top of it, and you turn it with a crank like this, and this big fan gets to going, and the chaff goes pew. And all the wheat is separated into a 5-gallon buckets. Now, if you don't have that, then what you do is you wait for a good windy day, and you take your grain in a pan, and you go, whoo, and it goes down like this, and all the chaff goes, whoo. You go, whoo, and away the chaff goes. And it may take a number of time, but you will get a great big, nice 5, 10, 15, 20 gallons of wheat that will carry you through the season. Are you ready to start rolling up your sleeves? But it is there to be done. And we've got some younger people in here. I hope and pray that you get the vision. Because I tell you, it's there to be done. And it is a great life, my friends. I mean it. I will never, God help me never to be ashamed or be sorry I ever started down this path. Because it's been a great life. It really has. And if I had 50 years ahead of us and the world didn't fall apart and Jesus didn't come back soon, which I hope and pray He does, that I still would have 50 more years of it. I would do it again. I would do it again. And God knows I would do it again, and He would give me the strength to learn even more than I know today. And so I just want to encourage you, and I want to thank all of you for being willing to listen to me. Now, you'll have to work it out with these folks if they want me to come back. And we'll try to do something again. A little on the level of, produce production. I do? We'll fill up a whole airplane. That'd be all right. Oh, yes.
We're going to hand the books out, one per family, and we do have some great controversy as well if you want to take one.
If you don't know of these books, I want to encourage those that don't know these books, please take one. The book Great Controversy rattled my gates in my hippie years. It helped me to see. It's a book dealing with the end time events. It gives you a lot of neat history, but it'll help you to see what's coming. I am not kidding you. It shook me up big time, but it shook me up in a right positive direction. I needed to be shooken up. So if you've never seen it, get it. And the little book, Country Living, oh, it's wonderful. It's just a great little book.
Where is it?
They have it back.
So we do thank you, the brother, for coming out and doing this for us. And if you have filled out the card, we will definitely let you know when it's time back, and we'll try and schedule something for our release so you can let us know when you can come back. So thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
I want to invite you to come to a church, but I need to have one through the email.
Yeah.